facts opened my eyes a while ago. We found something really cool. So we're going to talk about them. And I think we can see what's fixing to happen. India and China. Okay, so we go back to Abraham. Abraham came down into the land at 75. Abraham made his first move when he's 70 years old. He went from one end down here close to the Gulf, all the way up to, on the Euphrates, up north of Israel, and then he came down into the land. His first move was at 70. The second one was at 75. He came into the land. Into the land. Okay. And then there was a drought. He goes down into Egypt. He comes back out. And at some point, we don't have a lot of information in between this time frame right here. But when he's 86, Ishmael is born. And Ishmael is his only heir until Isaac's born when Abraham's 99. In this time frame right here is Genesis chapter 14. It said there were 4 kings. The 5 kings rebelled against the 4 kings. So we have the 5 kings right now. The BRICS money system. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. We have 5 kings rebelling, and they're going to rebel from the 4. The 4 is said they served Chedorlaomer is the main one in this time frame, and they rebelled from him. I wonder if that's symbolic of like the United States or our money system. I hate to even say the United States, the British money system, whatever, but the money system. These 5 rebelled from serving the 4. And the 4 come down and they take over. Or they come down and they fight against the other 5. Now, when this happens, right at the end of this happens, Abraham goes up. Abraham goes up and they take Lot. And he goes up and rescues Lot. And then he goes back home and he blesses Melchizedek, or Melchizedek blesses him. He tithes. So now we have Melchizedek, the king of righteous, Melchizedek. So who is Melchizedek? Is that Yeshua? A different lineage? Not after the order of Aaron? A Kohen Gadol that's not after the order of Aaron, but a different order after the order of Melchizedek? He's trying to tell us who he is. He's Melchizedek. Yeshua and Melchizedek are one, and he's talking about the order. And so therefore, Abraham goes up to rescue Lot, and he wins. Abraham's only got 218 men with him. What does that represent? I have no idea. But we're on to something. Think about that. So we have the 5 kings rebelling against the 4 kings, and this is Genesis chapter, I think 14, what it was. So keep that in mind. Try to figure that out, because this morning's drosh is all about prophetic patterns. So it kind of give you an idea of maybe what's coming. Anyway, I thought I'd share that. Kind of cool. Okay. Y'all are an excited bunch. You gonna fall asleep on me? I have to yell a bunch today. Want to liven y'all up. Okay, we are on the last portion. We get to Kazakh today. So let's go to Genesis chapter 47, verse 28. And we will go to a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bakar banu mikol amim v'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. All right, chapter 47, verse 28. Who wants to read? Go.
Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years in the days of Jacob. The years of his life were 147 years. The time approached for Israel to die, so he called for his son, for Joseph, and said to him, Please, if I have found favor in your eyes, please place your hand under my thigh and do kindness and truth with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, for I will lie down with my fathers, and you shall transport me out of Egypt and bury me in their tomb. He said, I personally will do as you have said. He replied, Swear to me, and he swore to him. Then Israel prostrated himself toward the head of the bed.
Okay. Did you finish the first that chapter?
That was the
first part? Okay. Look at this. So Jacob goes down into Egypt at 130 years old. From the time, let's go 22 years before that, would be 108, is when Joseph is sold into slavery. Look at this pattern. He lived 17 years with Joseph before Joseph was sold into slavery. Joseph was gone 22 years. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Okay? And then he's with him 17 years after that. So he's with Joseph 34 years, but it's like a balance. It's like he had 17 years of Joseph's life, and then he had 17 years at the end of Joseph's life. What does that mean? Boom. I don't know. It's something, though. It's like a balance. There's 17 here, there's 17 here with Joseph. Now, here, he raised Joseph up. Here, he's got Joseph's grandkids. He's got his grandkids, Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. It's like an equal portion. He got 17 years before this and 17 years after that. So what does that mean? How does that reflect Yeshua? Joseph is Yeshua.
I don't know, but Jim Lewis always said 17 means
Security.
Jim Lewis,
How long did Yeshua start his ministry? When he started his ministry till he died, how long was it?
3.5 years.
Okay, so you think there's a 3.5 years now after the intermediate time? We got another 3.5 years coming? Kind of like an equal pattern? That whole, and 3.5 years is the middle of a sabbatical cycle, right?
I don't know, but that 22 is interesting.
I'm sorry?
I don't know, but the 22 is interesting.
How?
Because of the Aleph date.
The Aleph Beit.
Yeah, there's 22 letters.
That's what I said. Yeah. It's 22 letters. Yeah. I don't know what it means either. But I will say this. We had, so the 22nd generation from, let's see, 20 and 21. 20th generation was Abraham. The 21st generation was Isaac. The 22nd generation was Jacob. The 23rd generation was his children. The 24th generation was his grandchildren, which was Ephraim specifically, and Manasseh. Now, the funny thing about these two, he adopted these two, right? Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, what's really cool, the 23rd generation, we got Benjamin, one of them. I mean, he had 12 sons, but the reason Benjamin is cool is because we had one president with a split term, Grover Cleveland, and Benjamin Harrison. That mean anything? Well, the northern kingdom was called Ephraim and Israel. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. And Ephraim and Manasseh, that was the two names for the northern kingdom. And I mean, kind of thought it was interesting, isn't it? Considered 9:11, Isaiah 9:11 is a quote to the northern kingdom, is it not? Am I saying everybody here is Israelite? No. But do we represent the northern kingdom? Probably. Saul and Jonathan, when they die, Saul is compared to an eagle, and Jonathan is compared to a lion. Is that United States and Great Britain as symbolic? I don't know. Kind of cool, though. Okay. Let's go down to chapter 48.
Wait, before you do that, I want to speak to chapter verse 29 for a minute. It says, "Deal kindly and truly with me, and bury not, I pray you, in Egypt." One of the greatest mitzvahs in Judaism is considered in participating in and helping someone
They can't repay you.
to the grave, because it is a mitzvah that can never be repaid. That person can never repay you for the kindness of seeing them properly buried. And so Judaism says this is one of the holiest mitzvahs that you can perform. And that's why when you see in Israel, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I've watched videos and stuff, when a funeral procession is heading down the street, people will drop what they're doing and join in, whether they knew the person or not, and go with all the way to the grave and see them buried, because they want to participate in that greatest mitzvah that cannot be repaid.
Now, you can apply that same thought. Yeshua does in the New Testament, said, when you perform a good deed for someone, if you go tell everybody, then, but if you don't tell anybody, then the only one who knows is him, and that's how you get the blessing. So he says the exact same thing from a different context in the New Testament. Good point. Okay, let's go down to chapter 48.
And it came to pass after these things that someone said to Joseph, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. Jacob was told, "Behold, your son Joseph has come to you." So Israel exerted himself, and sat upon the bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "El Shaddai has appeared to me in Luz, in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. He said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous. I will make you a congregation of nations, and I will give this land to your offspring after you as an eternal possession. And now your 2 sons, whom were born to you in the land of Egypt, before my coming to you in Egypt, shall be mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, like Reuben and Simeon. But progeny born to you after them shall be yours. They will be included under the name of their brothers with regard to their inheritance. But as for me, when I come from Paddan, Rachel died on me in the land of Canaan, on the road, while there was still a stretch of land to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the road to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons, and he said, Who are these? And Joseph said to his father, They are my sons whom God has given me here. He said, Bring them to me, if you please, and I will bless them. Now Israel's eyes were heavy with age. He could not see, so he brought them near him, and he kissed them. He hugged them. Israel said to Joseph, I dare not accept the thought that I would see your face, and here God has shown me even your offspring. Joseph then removed them from his knees, and he prostrated himself with his face toward the ground. Joseph took the 2 of them, Ephraim with his right hand to Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left to Israel's right. Then he drew close to him, but Israel extended his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head. He maneuvered his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. He blessed Joseph and said, O God, before whom my forefathers Abraham and Isaac walked, God who shepherds me from my inception until this day, may the angel who redeems me from all evils bless the lads, and may my name be declared upon them, and the names of my forefathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they perforate abundantly like fish within the land. Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him. So he supported his father's hands to remove it from upon Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, No, not so, father, for this is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused, saying, I know, my son, I know he too will become a people, and he too will become great. Yet his younger brother shall become greater. Then he and his his offspring's fame will fill the nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, by you shall Israel bless, saying, my God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. And he put Ephraim's before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die. God will be with you and will bring you back to the land of your fathers. And as for me, I have given you Shechem, one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Aramite with my sword and with my bow.
Okay, so back up in verse 5, we see Jacob crossing his hands, putting his right hand on Ephraim and the left hand on Manasseh. And Joseph says, Dad, no, this is my firstborn. He says, son, I know him. I know. Surely Manasseh will be great, but Ephraim will be greater. If you go back up to verse 5, he already said it in verse 5. He said, Ephraim and Manasseh will be like Reuben and Simeon. Ephraim's mentioned first, Reuben's mentioned first of those two. And then Manasseh's mentioned second, Simeon's mentioned second. So he already in verse 5, he says his eyes were dim. Before he even blessed him, he already prophesied that Ephraim will be greater than Manasseh. Now, why did he do that? Why? I mean, we can speculate all day long on this one, but why will Ephraim be greater? Surely Manasseh will be great, but Ephraim will be greater. Think about that. But he already knew in verses 5, Reuben and Simeon, Reuben the firstborn, Simeon the second, Ephraim and Manasseh. Let me ask you another question. Did Joseph have any other children besides Ephraim and Manasseh? Yes, he did. Yep. Who did they inherit with? He got a double portion. His children inherited with either Ephraim, his other children, they either inherited with Ephraim or Manasseh, because he didn't get a third portion, but he got a double portion. Ephraim and Manasseh, and the funny thing is, the firstborn gets the double portion, but in this context, well, he compared Ephraim, it's kind of like he replaced Reuben and Simeon with Ephraim and Manasseh. So they get the firstborn blessing, but they're not considered the older brother. Now let's go to the New Testament. Yeshua tells this parable. He says, a man had two sons. The younger son went out partying, spent everything he had, and when he had nothing left, he was living with the pigs, basically. But the older son that stayed with the father, when the younger son came back, the older son was kind of upset, and the father said, son, calm down. Everything I have is yours. Your brother went out and spent everything he had, but he's come back home. Accept him in. So who's the older brother in that sense? Okay, what's this? Ephraim, Manasseh. They go out, they party, they spoil their inheritance. But who's the one back home that's with the father taking care of everything? And the father says, son, relax. What I have is yours, but your brothers come back home. We're talking about two different kingdoms. We're talking about Judah, and we're talking about Ephraim. In the last days, Ephraim's going to be woke up, and they're going to come back. But Judah already has their portion sealed. Think about that. It's right there in that story. In the New Testament, look at it from a different angle. Imagine Ephraim is saying, well, no, it's kind of a twist. But anyway, so I think there's something in that story too. But in that context, the older brother, and in the rest of the scripture, Judah is kind of referred to as the older brother. Even though Joseph got the double portion, Beth.
There are 5 other instances where a younger sibling is elevated over the older. Who can name them?
5?
There's 5 that I have listed here. There's probably more.
Okay. The younger brother elevated Esau and Jacob. Cain and Abel, Abel. Abraham. Isaac. Moshe. And David. Moshe And
Manasseh. That's 6. The other question that I thought was really interesting is why was it important for the boys to be adopted? Besides getting the double portion, we know that.
oh no.
I guess because Joseph was now a servant to Pharaoh.
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Joseph was a servant to Pharaoh and he couldn't break away.
He had to make sure that the boys' inheritance was in Israel, not in Egypt. He moved the boys' inheritance from Egypt back into Israel.
That's a good point.
That's the idea, yes.
Okay, now let me show you a completely different perspective. Okay, so the menorah, the showbread table, the lechem panim, and the mitzvah zahav. The three golden things in the sanctuary. The mitzvah, the golden altar, the lechem, the showbread table, and the menorah. Moses built one of each. Solomon built 10 of each. And for the record, these 10 were never used. In the second, all that was hid when the first temple was destroyed. When they came back from the second temple, there was one more built. Okay? They built this one from memory. They were only in exile for 70 years. When they came back, they built everything from memory. They didn't have the first ones to build from, only memory. And then, right now, getting ready for the next sacrificial system, let's just say the third sacrificial system, this one, they built one more of each one of them. And it's built from this one, from a picture they have, the menorah especially, when it went down into, they took them on the Arch of Titus, they did a sculpture of the ark being carried out of the second temple. So now we have 1, 10, 12, 13. How many tribes are there? There's only 12, but Ephraim and Manasseh Joseph got a double portion. So here we have 2 that are built from memory from these first 11. Now you have Ephraim, Manasseh, and the rest of the 11 kids. So those menorahs and showbread tables and golden altars of incense match all the tribes, with Ephraim and Manasseh being included in that count. And these first 10 that Solomon built, and the one that Moses has built, and this one, the tradition is that this stuff right here, this is in the Vatican. They're saying there's positive evidence that the Catholicism has all of this stuff right here from the Second Temple carried off and stored in the Vatican. The first ones were all hidden, and this is the one they got today that they've made, and they made them from memory. So we got all of these menorahs, and the only one that was ever lit in the first temple was this one, not these. So you got all of these menorahs and showbread tables, which represent what? What's the symbolism of that? They represent the 12 tribes, with Joseph getting a double portion, so 13 tribes. And it's right there in the story of the menorahs that we built, getting ready for the third sacrificial period. What if all of those are found and all of those are brought back? What's happening to them? You remember the verse in Isaiah says they will burn incense to my name in Egypt? What if in the millennial, and I'm just speculating, what if in the millennial on every continent there's a miniature temple, not like the one in Jerusalem? The one in Jerusalem will have the Ark of the Covenant. That's the only thing separating. I mean, in the Holy of Holies was the Ark. But what if there's other temples around the world that have a menorah, lechem panim, and mitzvah zahav, the golden altar? What if they have smaller temples around the world? Just speculating, with the main one being in Jerusalem. You have 13 tribes, 13 different menorahs. I just think that has to be interesting that there's actually 13 of them compared to the 13 boys. Anyway, okay. And then he says in verse 22, as for me, I have given you Shechem, one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. Shechem. Why is that important? So where's Jacob asking to be buried at? Jacob asked him, when I die, take me back to our home and bury me. But where's he going to bury him at? He's burying him in Hebron. But here, Joseph is given Shechem. Okay, Hebron is the tomb of the patriarchs. Judah declares David king in Hebron. Israel declares David king in Shechem. And Joseph is the latter, Israel. And Judah, the southern kingdom, they declare David king in Hebron. The two burial places of the patriarchs. Joseph is buried in Shechem. It's a very important place. But Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried in Hebron. So the burial places of both the patriarchs here, between that and Joseph, is where Judah declared David king and Israel declared David king. And Hebron is, David went up to Hebron and reigned there for 7.5 years. Hebron is where David fought Ishbosheth. So, Christianity's got this Antichrist, the one that's coming. Well, David fights Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth's name means man of shame. And David fights him for 2 years, I believe, while he's in Hebron. That's after Saul and Jonathan die. So right there is your prophetic man of shame in the New Testament. Man of sin, man of shame, whatever. It's right there in that story. So David fights Saul's son Ishbosheth until Abner, his general, finally surrenders to David. And once he surrenders, Israel is united under David. So the general of Ishbosheth surrenders, which is Abner. And then David becomes king, and all of Israel declared David king in Shechem. All these stories, they just return, and they're all pointing back to something Hashem's trying to get us to see. Something's going to happen in Shechem, something big. All of Israel will declare David king in Shechem. Or maybe it's symbolic. Maybe there's something symbolic, not necessarily the location, but something symbolic of that happens there. But Judah first declares David king in Hebron. Would that happen again? There's coming a descendant of David, a physical descendant of David. We're not talking about Yeshua. There is a physical descendant. In Ezekiel chapter 40 to the end of the book, it talks about David's descendant, a man with children. He's not allowed to take any other Israelite's land and give it to his children. He has to give his children inheritance of his own land. That is a physical man. That's not Yeshua. You wouldn't have to tell him he can't do that because he knows he can't do that. We're talking about a physical descendant of King David that will reign in the millennial in Jerusalem. Not Yeshua. Yeshua is going to reign over the whole world. We know that. We know he'll reign from Jerusalem too. But we're talking about a physical descendant of David in the story of Ezekiel. It mentions him several times. So that's why chapter 40 to the end of the book of Ezekiel is one of my favorite. You want to know what the millennial is going to be like? Start in chapter 40 and just read it to the end of the book. It gives you every insight you can imagine to the fourth temple that's going to start, Beersheba, Isaac's fourth well, and it all goes right down to, anyway. Okay. Chapter 49. Who wants to read? Go, Alex.
Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come." Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob, listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power, turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up onto your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel.
Stop a minute. Reuben's impetuous as water. That don't sound like a blessing, does it? So Reuben just gets punished. He's no longer the firstborn. He loses that right. Simeon and Levi, they're the next to be punished. They don't earn that right either. Who steps up to who's the next one in line? Judah. Now, it's already prophesied in their names. Hashem already had this was going to happen. I guess it's kind of like predestinated free choice. They had to make choices, but it's already prophesied, or he already knew what was going to happen. Because in Judah's name, Yod, He, Vav, He, and the Dalet is the number 4. Judah is the 4th child. So in Judah's name is the name of God plus the number 4. And so it's already prophesied. Judah became basically the older brother at this point. Now he doesn't get the double birthright portion. That was given to Joseph. But in this context, Judah, Reuben lost it because he's impetuous. Shimon and Levi lost it because of the story of Shechem, killed everybody at Shechem. And Judah, it falls on his leadership. Now we go back and look at who stood up for Benjamin. Let's go back to when Benjamin, when they went to Egypt and they had to leave Shimon there. You remember when they were in Egypt, Joseph, they didn't know who Joseph was. He looked like an Egyptian, right? And Reuben's, when Joseph put them all in prison for a day or two, 3 days, Reuben said, "This is what happened to us. I told you to leave the boy alone." And Joseph says, "Oh, Reuben stood up for me. He's forgiven. I'm not going to hold him prisoner." He held Shimon prisoner, the next in line. Authority. Reuben, you were responsible because you failed. I mean, you tried to stand up for me, so I'm not going to, but you failed. Then I'm holding Shimon accountable. And then the rest of the brothers went back home. So in this same context, we're looking at the authority, who's in charge. Now, after all this, the rest of the scripture, Judah, I think most times after this, Judah is going to be considered the older brother. And Judah was the one that stood up for Benjamin. Remember what Judah told his father. Reuben says, "Dad, give me Benjamin. If I don't bring him back, you can kill my 2 sons." That's exactly what a grandfather wants to hear. Impetuous. And then Judah stood up and said, "Dad, if you don't send Benjamin with us, we're all going to die. Send him with us and I will take responsibility for him." There's a brother standing up. But Judah lost 2 sons, remember? Right before this, Hashem got Judah's attention big time. Judah had some bad character at the beginning. Hashem straightened him out, took 2 of his sons, and now he knows what his father was going through. And he says, "Dad, let me take Benjamin, and I will bring him back to you." And then Joseph takes Benjamin. Benjamin's on trial. Judah stands up and says, "Take me as a prisoner and let the boy go. Keep me because I'm responsible for this kid." And so that showed leadership. And we've seen Reuben lost it, Shimon and Levi lost it, but Judah got it. Now Levi had another blessing. Levi and Shimon were actually divided when they had come into the land. Levi was divided in the priestly cities, right? But Shimon had 2 portions. When they came in, Shimon, I think, was divided strictly in Judah, had a portion here and had a portion up here. Two different portions, they were divided, so that prophecy was already fulfilled. Okay, go. We are on Judah now.
Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk.
Good stop. Okay, so now we get a scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver between his feet till Shiloh comes. Now, I think this has been taken out of context a whole bunch, but think about this right here. 2,000 years ago, I believe the Messianics were arguing with Judaism about this phrase. I think they were saying that these two phrases, scepter is masculine and lawgiver is feminine. Now, all through the Psalms, remember the rod of your father, meaning strength and masculine. But always remember the law of your mother. The law is always in feminine. The lawgiver, the feminine side. And so the rabbis, I think 2,000 years ago, the Messianics started arguing with the rabbis that didn't believe in Yeshua, saying, this is Yeshua's genealogy. In the New Testament, we have two genealogies, one from the father's side, one from the mother's side. It goes back to the scepter and the lawgiver. And I think the rabbis had to come up with another alternative to that because they didn't believe in Yeshua. So about 135 or somewhere after that, somewhere around, I'm not sure when the Talmud actually started, the rabbis translate this right here as being Talmud Bavli. Let me see. Wait a minute. Yeah. Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalayim. Yerushalami. Okay. Talmud Bavli was started by a guy in Babylon called Reish. Let's see. Can't spell. The Reish Galusha. Okay. He was a descendant of King David on the father's side. He declared himself king in Babylon. The Jews followed him, Babylon didn't, but he declared himself king in Babylon, and he had 50 men running before him and after him. He was very well off, had a lot of money. And so the idea of a king, you had 50 go before you and 50 go after you. Where do you get that from? Do you guys know where they get that from in Torah? Remember the verse that said when the ark would travel, Moses said, "Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered." There's an inverted nun before it and an inverted nun after it. A nun is 50. And the middle is a king traveling. So in the Torah scroll, that's what they get the idea that there's 50 goes before the king and 50 goes after the king. It's right there from the Torah scroll. And so anyways, that's what this Reish Galusha did in Babylon. And he's the one that financed or put together, started doing Talmud Bavli. Now the Talmud in Babylon, they had plenty of time to work on it. They had several hundred years. They weren't under pressure like the ones in Jerusalem. Talmud Yerushalayim was started by Judah Hanasi. That's Judah the prince. And Judah the prince is a descendant of King David on the mother's side. Reish Galusha is a descendant of King David on the father's side. That's how the rabbis translate that. But that's several hundred years after Yeshua. So in my thinking, they were like, the Messianics that understood were going to the rabbis and saying, this is Yeshua. Both these words are talking about one person, Yeshua. And the rabbis are like, oh no, there's got to be another answer from this. Now, this is just my thinking, but it's logical. It's a logical progression into what this is talking about. Now, I think the part we're all overlooking is Shiloh. A scepter shall not depart from Judah, a lawgiver from his faith, till Shiloh comes. Shiloh. In Hebrew is Shiloh. So, what's going to happen at Shiloh? Now, here's what we don't know. Here's what we can only speculate. When the temple, the tabernacle, it was a tent. I'll be very careful. So in Jerusalem, the temple in the wilderness traveled a Mishkan, the tent. Then, when it came into Shiloh, it was half tent, half temple. I don't have a copy of that one. We need to get a copy of that one, Beth, if we can. Go online and see if we can find a copy of a replica of the tabernacle at Shiloh. At Shiloh, it had solid walls with a tent top. So it's kind of like a stepping stone. And then when it got to Jerusalem, it became the Temple of Solomon. This is Herod's temple, the second temple, but the idea is it became a solid structure. So we went from a tent, we stepped up to solid walls, a cloth top or animal skin top, all the way to the actual temple itself. So, but in Shiloh is where this first progression, this first step came up. So we're talking about a sacrificial system. Now, when we enter into the land, is the same thing as entering into that 1,000-year Sabbath. What if entering into that 1,000-year Sabbath, we go back and look at the same patterns when we came into the land? Because the first thing they did, Joshua set up the temple at Shiloh. And right now at Shiloh is where, if I'm not mistaken, that's where they're trying to do the visitor center for the Red Heifer Project. They're in Shiloh. I thought that's kind of interesting. Because what if we're all looking at it completely wrong? What if the sacrifices started somewhere else? Could they start in Shiloh? Absolutely. Will they? I'm not saying they will. I don't know. But I'm saying they could. And they already own Shiloh. So what if remember that Hezekiah's Passover happened so fast nobody was ready for it. What if something like this happens and it started somewhere else? I'm not saying it will be, but what if? Because Shiloh made me a scepter shall not depart from Judah, or lawgiver from his feet till Shiloh come. So anyways, that's the rabbinic perception of what the scepter and lawgiver is. The Reish Galusha started the Babylonian Talmud, and the Talmud Yerushalayim, Judah Hanasi. And I don't know if you guys know this, but to be on the Sanhedrin, if you're one of the rabbis on the Sanhedrin, the Nasi, the prince of the Sanhedrin, has to be a son of David. Did y'all know that? So you see a future Sanhedrin set up, and you see somebody on there they call Nasi of the Sanhedrin. He's a physical son of David. The prince of the Sanhedrin, Judah Hanasi, was the Nasi of the Sanhedrin. And he's the one that started formulating. And when I say Talmud, they took basically teachings that everybody had and they started writing them down on paper. Because there were so many people, they knew they were going to be scattered out. So they started collecting all these writings and then they started writing them down. Before this, it was actually forbidden to write down all these teachings. They were just passed on from teacher to student. Beth.
Something that people don't realize, I think, I have to take this apart a little bit to show. I don't need that.
No.
We talk about the temple at Shiloh having solid walls, stone walls. This one did too. You know that? Okay, so when you look at this, you see the pillars in the front, and you think they go all the way around, right? But they don't.
Don't undo it.
No, they don't.
Don't undo it.
Yeah, it's made to be undone. It's made that way. So if you fold the top back, what do you see?
Oh, cool. I didn't think about that. You're right.
You see solid wall.
This is what she's talking about.
It had solid walls on the side. So it really isn't that different than the tabernacle at Shiloh. The only difference really is that this is stone instead of these gold-covered planks.
Cool. Great point. Okay, so now this whole phrase, a scepter shall not depart from Judah, a lawgiver between his feet till Shiloh comes. Okay, now this gets very offensive. This is, you have a lot of people, especially if you're more into Hebrew roots, where we don't follow Judah's authority, blah, blah, blah. There are some things we don't have the authority to change. And one of them is a calendar. The calendar, there has to be certain animal sacrifices for every day. If you're the festivals, there has to be certain offerings for that. Messianics can't do that. We don't have that right or that authority. And if Judah's doing it wrong, we're guiltless anyways. That's the story of David and the showbread. When David ate the showbread, he was not allowed to eat the showbread. You can't say he ate it because he was king. He wasn't king. You can't say he ate it because he was going to be king. No, he wasn't. Because his son, Uzziah, went in one day to burn incense in the temple, and he was struck with leprosy. And he was a good king. He was as good a king as David. Uzziah was a wonderful king. But in the last 2 years of his reign, he got arrogant. He went in to do something that only the priest could do. And Hashem, there was an earthquake, the temple split, and it hit him right on the forehead, a shine of light, and he turned leprous immediately. So you can't say David ate the showbread because he was righteous or going to be king. The reason David ate the showbread, the priesthood made up some kind of cobbled up rule and said, if you hadn't been with women, then you can have this. They weren't allowed to do that. And in the next chapter, 85 of them were put to death. So David did not eat the showbread because he was king. So therefore, if Judaism is doing something on the calendar, especially, I'm not going to go into all the other stuff, but if the calendar, if they're wrong, we're guiltless. It's not upon us. We do not have the right to set our own calendar. And I know that offends a lot of people, but it's the truth. And Yeshua says in the New Testament, the greatest faith he saw in all of it, it wasn't even an Israelite. It was someone who understood authority. A man said, I tell my servants to go, and they go. He said, I'm not even worthy of you coming under my roof, but if you speak it, it will happen. And Yeshua said, I've seen no greater faith in all of Israel. And it was someone who understood authority. Now think about that. So I'm not saying you have to go follow every law they put before you, but I'm saying some things like calendars, we're not allowed to do that. Not only are we're forbidden to do it, and if they are keeping the wrong date, we're guiltless anyways. That's on them. But can you imagine taking responsibility for something you're not allowed to do, and even if you did it on the right day, you took responsibility you didn't have, you're still guilty. So, sometimes we say we really don't want that responsibility. And when you try to usurp that responsibility, you're getting in some dangerous territory. So anyway, for what it's worth. But I think Shiloh right here, I think this is the really cool part about this whole prophecy. Something really awesome is going to happen in Shiloh. Or it may just be a representation of what the name means. I don't know, but it's going to be cool. Okay, go. Verse 13.
Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend toward Sidon. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey, lying down among the sheep pens. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backward. I look for your deliverance, Lord. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. Naphtali is a doe.
Wait, stop. I'm sorry. I was busy on something else. Okay. So after Dan, he prophesies, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. And the reason this is important is that salvation, that's Yeshua. I have waited for your salvation. Salvation comes after Dan, but what does that mean? So we look at Dan, and we look at the judges in the book of Judges. The last judge that was mentioned to actually judge, now there was a few things happened after this, but the last judge that judged over Israel was Samson, and he was a Danite. I think this prophecy is talking about after Samson, then we went into the kings. We went into Saul, we went into David. But on our time scale today, I think the judges in the book of Judges match up with the prime ministers of Israel. We know that Golda Meir was the fourth prime minister, and we see that Deborah, the only female judge, was the fourth judge. And I don't think that's by chance. And some people say Golda's number 5, but David Ben Gurion had a split term, so she's number 4, the fourth different judge. And the funny thing about that is, if you apply that same logic, then up until the last election, Naphtali Bennett became prime minister, and then we had another one, Lapid, basically filled in until the next election. And that almost represents after Bibi. But Bibi before this was number 17 and number 12. He was the 12th different prime minister, but he was the 17th in order. 5 of them had split terms. So 17 is security and 12 is Samson. So I'm just wondering how close we are to the judges being through, and now we're going into the next stage, which is electing kings. That's right there in that story. And that's the only way the story makes sense is right after Dan, Jacob says, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. Salvation. Look up salvation in Scripture, in the Tanakh, and see how many times it's mentioned and where it's mentioned, who's mentioned before it, who's mentioned after it, and it becomes clear as a bell at what point salvation comes. And we are really, really close. I think when you see Damascus fall, literally whatever happens there, that you're going to see salvation pop on the screen at some point shortly after that. Now, it could be 50, 100 years. I'm just saying. 2,000 years ago, they thought it was any day. But I think we're getting really, really close. Okay.
It's also the 15th blessing of the Amidah.
It's the what?
The 15th blessing of the Amidah.
Okay.
I wait for your salvation, O Lord. It's the 15th blessing of the Amidah.
Oh, restore our judges as in earlier times. Yes, absolutely. And so, but then in the Amidah, that's where the study really kicks off. It says, return our judges as at the beginning. And I think that is the story we're at right here. But immediately after that is the heretics prayer, which was added for you and I. That prayer has to be removed. And the next prayer after that is the gathering together of everybody. Everybody that truly believes in Hashem, put our lot together. And so we got a blessing that's got to be removed because it was put in because of us. It will be removed. And the only people that can remove it is who? Sanhedrin. It has to be ruled on by court. Just like Joseph put Benjamin on trial, and Judah stood up for him. So something's got to happen in court before a Sanhedrin. And that has to happen with Elijah. That's Elijah's job. He goes before a Sanhedrin, and because the Sanhedrin tries prophets, they will try Elijah, and then he gives them power. Now, how does all that happen? Who knows, but something's got to happen. Okay, let's go down to Naphtali.
Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. But his bow remained steady. His strong arms stayed limber. because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God, who helps you, because of the Almighty, who blesses you with blessings of the skies above, blessings of the deep springs below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, in the evening he divides the plunder. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessing appropriate to him. Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field of a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people.
Okay, so you've already realized that there's nothing but chance. Yisrael. Okay, the names of the patriarchs and the matriarchs of Israel: Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah, and Rachel. The names of the patriarchs are all in the word Yisrael. The Yod stands for Yaakov. The Shin stands for Sarah. The Resh stands for Rebekah. And Rachel. The Aleph stands for Abraham. And the Lamed stands for Leah. Okay? Abraham or Isaac, Yitzhak. Okay, so the Yod stands for Yaakov and Yitzhak. The Shin stands for Sarah. The Resh stands for Rivka and Rachel. I never even put this pattern together. Let me put this in order. And Yaakov. Okay, so the Yod stands for Yitzhak and Yaakov, and the Resh stands for Rebekah and Rachel, the two wives of the two the Yod stood for. That's cool. Never even caught that. Yitzhak, Rivka, Yaakov, and Rachel. And Leah down here. Huh. Okay. Find something cool every day. All right. Questions, comments? Y'all ready to go to sleep? Okay, I'll finish. Chapter 50. Then Joseph fell upon his father's face. He wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph ordered his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, so the physicians embalmed Israel. His 40-day term was completed for such as the term of embalmed, and the Egyptians bewailed him for 70 days. When his bewailing period passed, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's household, saying, If you please, if I have found favor in your eyes, speak now in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father, and adjure me, saying, Behold, I am about to die, and in my grave, which I have hewn for myself in the land of Canaan, there you are to bury me. Now I will go up, if you please, and bury my father, and then I will return. Pharaoh said, Go up, bury your father, as he has adjured you. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all of Pharaoh's servants, the elders of his household, all the elders of the land of Egypt, And all of Joseph's household, his brothers, his father's household, only their young children, their flocks, and their cattle did they leave in the region of Goshen. You know, it's funny. The second time when he come out, he tells Pharaoh, so we ain't leaving anything. But this time, they did leave the children and the flocks. And he brought up with them both chariots and horsemen, and the camp was very imposing. They came to Goren Hatad, which is across the Jordan, and there they had a very great and imposing eulogy, and he ordained a 7-day mourning period for his father. When the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw the mourning in Goren Hatad, they said, this is a grievous mourning for Egypt. Therefore it was named Avel Mitzrayim, which is across the Jordan. His sons did for him exactly as he had instructed him. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan, and they buried him in the cave of Machpelah field, the field that Abraham had brought as a burial estate from Ephron the Hittite facing Mamre. Joseph returned to Egypt. He and his brother, how much did he give for that field? 400 shekels of silver. So again, now I didn't put that in the teaching last week. We're talking about 400. So that puts Eliyahu in Hebron. I think about that one. 14. Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all that he had gone up with him to bury his father. After he buried his father, Joseph's brothers perceived that their father was dead, and they said, perhaps Joseph will nurse hatred against us. Then he will surely repay us all the evil that we did to him. So they instructed Joseph to be told, your father gave orders before his death, saying, thus shall you say to Joseph, oh, please kindly forgive the spiteful deed of your brothers and their sin, for they have done you evil. So now please forgive the spiteful deed of the servants of your father's God. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers themselves who went and flung themselves before him and said, we be ready to be your slaves. But Joseph said to them, fear not, for am I instead of God? Although you intended me harm, God intended it for good in order to accomplish. It is clear as this day that a vast people will be kept alive. So now fear not, I will sustain you and your young ones. Thus he comforted them, and they spoke to his heart. Now, why did they say that to him? Apparently, those 17 years that Jacob came down into Egypt, Joseph didn't fully convince them they had been forgiven. Think about that. I mean, at this point, they're thinking, okay, he's still mad at us. So he hadn't fully convinced them that he'd forgiven them. That makes sense? I mean, they were still scared.
How much time did he have to spend with them, being in the position he was in his household too?
Right.
So he may not have had a whole lot of time to interact with them to reassure them. And then there's the other thing of they realized how evil what they did was, and they thought, he's just biding his time so that he doesn't hurt Dad by killing us all.
So, but if he's busy and he's not that time to spend with them, then in their mind they're thinking, oh, he's deliberately. So sometimes we think things that aren't happening. We think we're so self-centered that we're something. Think about that.
Everything that happens here is about me.
Sometimes so Beth and I get real busy. We get a lot of things going on. You walk in, you say hi, and if we don't, say hi to you, you think, oh, they're mad at me. I mean, we're not mad at you. Okay. Now, seriously, that happens, though. Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw 3 generations from Ephraim. Even the sons of Machir, son of Manasseh, were raised on Joseph's knees. Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely remember you and bring you up out of this land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph adjured the children of Israel, saying, when God will indeed remember you, then you must bring my bones up out of here. And Joseph died at the age of 110 years. They embalmed him. He was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Okay, y'all ready? Kazak, Benik, Kazak. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. Okay.
So it says he saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. So he didn't just see his great-grandchildren, he saw his great-great-grandchildren, if you count that out.
Yeah.
So you have Ephraim, his son, and then great, great, and
Machir.
Ephraim, grandchildren,
Joseph saw his great-grandchildren.
And great-great-grandchildren.
No.
Yes, Joseph saw,
Joseph, Ephraim, Machir, great-grandson. Sons, grandson, great-grandson.
you don't count Joseph though, because it says he saw Ephraim's children of the third generation.
Okay,
You've got one more generation there.
okay.
If you go by this wording, now this is English too, it may be different in Hebrew.
Questions, comments? Wow. Y'all about to fall asleep, aren't you? I'm that boring. All right. I'm finished. Turn out the lights.